Hello, and welcome to my next tutorial. Today I'm going to be talking about how to use Ubuntu 16.04 Server Edition, which is actually still in beta on Windows 10 or Windows 8.1, and it has to be Pro version in order to use this. And I actually show you how to use the Hyper-V virtualization software contained in Microsoft operating systems. This is actually pretty similar to the way it's also used on Windows Server Editions. Okay, so the first thing is chances are you don't have these icons on your desktop, and Microsoft actually put them in a really bad spot now. If you right click on here and go to personalize and then go to themes, for some reason they're under themes, and you click desktop icon here. You want to click all these and hit apply, and it'll put all of them on your desktop. Now these are a little bit different than shortcuts. You'll notice that there's no little arrow here representing a shortcut, and they actually have different properties. When you right click on them, you'll see this menu here. If it was a shortcut, this menu wouldn't work. One thing is, I don't recommend putting the control panel, of course, on people's desktops unless you know you're the only one using it. It's pretty easy to get through the start menu as well, but I like having it on here when it's my machine. So put these icons on there, and then just click OK. And then you're going to right-click on this and go to Properties. And I actually have that window already open here because it actually contains your product key, and you want to keep that hidden from other people. But there's some information here that you do need to check before you continue. The first thing is you want to make sure you have a Pro version of Windows 8.1 or Windows 10. If you don't have Pro, if you have Home version, you won't be able to install Hyper-V. So that's the first thing you want to check. The next thing you want to check is your processor type. If you have a newer processor, you should be fine. This one's actually pretty old. We're going to take this model number, i7-3517U, and just type it into Google here. And this is the first website that comes up as Intel site. You can actually see it was launched Q2 of 2012, so it's already 4 years old. But to make sure that your processor works with Hyper-V, you want to come down here and make sure it says this, Intel Virtualization Technology VTX, yes. As long as it says yes, Hyper-V will work with this processor. Same goes with AMD processors. Here's an AMD website. If you scroll down here, you'll come to this box here, and you can click Features here, and you'll see here it says AMD Virtualization Technology. Essentially, this is the same thing on both chip manufacturers that you'll need to have in order to run Hyper-V. Okay, so if you have an older processor, it may have been disabled, the Hyper-V technology in the BIOS. So you may have to reboot your machine, go into the BIOS, you hit F1, you hit F10, hit delete, one of those keys. It'll sometimes tell you on the screen, hit this key to get into the BIOS. And you want to go to the processor section and make sure that the virtualization technology is enabled. If your machine's within the last year, chances are they're all enabled by default. For some reason, they were disabled by default on some of the older models, possibly even this i7-3517U, which is 4 years old already, may have been disabled for some reason. Maybe just to quality assurance to make sure that there wasn't any issues. But it's all been flushed out. Hyper-V and this virtualization technology it's going on at least 4 years, and it's been working pretty well so far on Windows and Linux. Okay, so once you have that all set up and you come back into Windows, the next step is to install Hyper-V. And you want to go to Control Panel here, and I just search for stuff here instead of navigating through the control panel since they love to change it so often. And I click on Programs and Features here, and then I do Turn Windows Features on and off. And you'll come down here and you'll see Hyper-V, and I actually have this already installed because it does require another reboot of your machine. So you want to check this box, click OK. It may do 1 or 2 reboots, log back in, and then you'll have Hyper-V installed. Okay, now let's put a Hyper-V icon on the desktop. So you click the Start menu and type in Hyper-V, and you used to be able to right-click on this and do Send to Desktop. Now, of course, you can't do that anymore on Windows 10, which is awesome. So click Open File in File Explorer here, and then right click on here and do Send to Desktop. Okay, so now we have Hyper-V software on our desktop. Okay, before we go into the Hyper-V software, let's get Ubuntu 16.04 Server Edition. So if you just load up the web browser, go to google.com, and Ubuntu 16.04 Server. You can see here the first link that comes up is the daily builds. Now, eventually, if this is after April 21st, 2016, I believe, or April 20th, Ubuntu 16.04 will already be released. This is still in beta up to this point, and today's date is the March 18th. So, another month or so before this releases out, but I'm starting to test this for my machines. So you want to click this 64-bit version, and you can confirm you want the 64-bit version here too. You can see that I'm running a 64-bit operating system, so you know that's supported. Okay, I actually already downloaded this ISO, so in order to save some time. So now let's go into the Hyper-V software. Okay, so this is what it looks like the first time you run it. Now before we even start installing Ubuntu 16.04, we have to make sure we supply some networking settings. Otherwise, our virtual machines won't have internet access. And this is what threw me off at the beginning when I started working with Hyper-V. So we want to come over here and go Virtual Switch Manager. And we want to create an internal IP address or an internal network adapter for this. And then you want to click Create Virtual Switch. And the name is fine. You can even put wireless here, since I'm going to bridge this off my wireless connection. Hyper-V actually did not always support wireless adapters, which was very annoying when I first tried to use this. You had to use a Cat5, which makes sense for servers, but if you're on a laptop and you're testing stuff, chances are you're on a wireless connection, and there was some workarounds, but it wasn't very easy to do. Now they finally support wireless adapters. So you want to click this, and you can see here I'm using this Intel Centrino Advanced N. This is just the wireless adapter in this machine. And when you click OK here, it's going to tell you some network stuff may be disrupted. So if you're doing anything like downloading the Ubuntu update or the ISO, or you're doing something else in the background that requires internet access, make sure you stop that before, or let it finish before you click OK here. You will lose internet connection while this happens. It does adjust your network adapter. It does take it offline for a second, and you can actually see this here. I'm actually remote in through a couple machines to get this to work in order to record this. So when I click yes, you're going to see this actually disconnect briefly the way I'm remoted into this machine, but it'll come back fairly quickly. So right now it is disabling. See that little flash there? It did disable the network adapter and added my virtual switch now. So now when I come in here and click virtual switch, let's see here. You want to right click on this and let's go to refresh. Virtual Switch Manager. Oh, it looked like it even failed. All right, let's try it again. Internal wireless. Maybe because I put a dash here. I don't know. Let's see. Yeah. Yes. Let's see if it helps. Let's see what the details are. Virtual switch cannot be bound to the Wi-Fi because another bridge is already in use. Okay, thanks, Microsoft. So chances are it is. Let's quit out of this. Go back into here. And go to Virtual Switch Manager. And now you can actually see here I have the new Virtual Switch Wireless. I don't know why it was a little bit buggy like that. But as long as you have this new Virtual Switch Wireless here, you're good to go for all your machines bridging off your wireless adapter. That was a little strange that it did that. Maybe it was just wasn't completed yet, since I'm doing this remotely through remote desktop RDP. Okay, so let's install Ubuntu finally. So we want to right click on this and go to new, and we want to go to a virtual machine. And here's the wizard that will walk you through it. So let's click next. We're just going to do Ubuntu 16.04 server beta. I just leave this as generation 1. You can try generation 2. It has more like UEFI BIOS stuff. I just like to use this generation 1. It works fine. Here, this specifies how much RAM you have. I recommend at least 2 gigs, so 2048. You can use dynamic memory for this virtual machine. This machine, total memory, only has 4 gigs, so you want to make sure you don't put in 4 gigs here. Ubuntu server will run pretty much with as low as 512 megs of RAM. So 2 gigs is plenty for this machine for testing. Okay, here we're selecting our new virtual switch wireless, which I created in the last step. If you don't have this option here, your virtual machine will not have internet access. So make sure you do this step and you see your virtual switch here. Otherwise, it won't have internet. Okay, now we're going to create the hard drive that goes along with the virtual machine. And basically, all the settings are pretty much fine here, except the size. It's up to you how big you want your virtual machine. I recommend about 35 gigs. If you need it for a lot of space, you can move it up. But 35 gigs is a pretty good in between, a minimal install and, full-fledged server that you need tons of stuff on. So I usually do, you can go as low as 20 usually if you want, but 35 is a sweet spot that I usually pick. Okay. Now we want to point, it's asking where do we want to install off of. We actually downloaded this ISO, and you can see here, this is the version right here. This is the code name, XENIAL. I don't even know how to pronounce that, but just going to select that. This is what we downloaded from the Ubuntu site right here, the daily builds. Okay, let's select that, click open, and click next. And the next step is we're going to actually start installing Ubuntu 16.04. And once you click finish, we can right click on this and go to start. And errors occurred. Not enough memory to start the virtual machine. Awesome. Okay, that's great. So I'm going to turn down the memory. Apparently I'm using too much, probably because I have a bunch of stuff running on this laptop already. That's great. So I'm going to right click on this and go to settings. And I'm going to come down to memory here, and we're going to do 512. And actually I'm going to turn off this dynamic memory. It's kind of idiotic that it said maximum RAM. What is that? 1 terabyte of RAM? I don't even know what it's doing there. So let's turn that off. Memory weight. Okay, I'm going to leave all these the same. Startup RAM is 512 now. It should be happy. We'll see. Okay. Okay, it started successfully. Okay, now if you've ever installed Ubuntu Server, this should look pretty familiar. And this will just basically be the setup steps for installing Ubuntu. And I pick English here, United States. I don't detect the keyboard layout. This will run through installing Ubuntu on Windows 10 Hyper-V. And once you have this done, you'll have a full-fledged Ubuntu Linux distribution running inside of Windows 10. We'll let this finish. This will take a little bit longer to do. There's quite a few setup steps here, but in the next 5 minutes, you'll have Ubuntu running on Windows 10. Let's see here. Another spot that you may know if the network is working or not is right there. It says succeeded. If it says it can't find the DHCP server or the network is not available, chances are the Hyper-V switch stuff we did here, this virtual switch manager, is not configured correctly for this. So you might want to cancel at that step, go back and try to redo it and get that step to complete successfully. So here I'm just going to do VM01 for virtual machine. That's the host name. The username I use is the Chef 17. That's interesting. They do show password and clear now. I haven't seen that option before. That's new. It gives you the option of encrypting your home directory. I don't usually do this unless you have a specific reason why. And even then, if you have reasons to encrypt data on your Ubuntu installation, you should know how to encrypt directories or volumes within Ubuntu. So I usually select no here. Okay, it says based on your time zone, you're in Chicago. I am. Okay. Now here is the part where it's going to partition the disks you used that you set up. Remember when we said 35 gigs? Now I know this page actually will say, warning, you're about to delete everything. You better be really careful on what you're doing here. And I'm actually going to select guided, use entire disk now here. And you got to be careful. It'll say warning right here. It's going to write over the disks and change everything. It's only changing the virtualization disk you assign to it. So don't worry about any of these warnings here. It won't delete anything from your Windows 10 machine. I know that's a little strange because if you were installing Ubuntu, like say on your laptop, without Hyper-V, like you just booted off the Ubuntu ISO, you could completely delete Windows 10 off your machine. So as long as you're in the Hyper-V software, you're in this menu, and you said you wanted to give it that 35 gigs, you'll be fine. It's setting it up all with self-contained inside this this virtual machine manager. And this is just about done with installing some of the software. You'll be able to, the next step is, I believe you'll be able to select which software you want to install onto your new Ubuntu Server Edition. Usually I don't select anything the first time around because you can always install it after it boots for the first time. So let's see if this finishes correctly here. The other thing I wanted to check real quick is let's let that finish. Oh, it asks you if you have a proxy. We don't have any special proxies. If you're installing this at a company, you better ask your sysadmin if you're using a proxy or not, system administrator. So just press enter here if you're not using a proxy. The next thing I'm going to download real quick while that's running in the background here is this program called Putty. Putty is basically a SSH terminal program to log into Linux machines remotely. Now, our machine's still being configured in the background, but then we can eventually use PuTTY to just get into the virtual machine without even running Hyper-V. And I'll show you how to do that at the end of this video here. Okay, you can install security updates automatically. Usually I do no automatic updates because if your machine ever updates automatically and you have some issue with the software, it may have been one of the packages that just got upgraded. So I usually don't do updates automatically. This is interesting. This is a little bit different. It actually says the standard system utilities. And I'm actually going to leave that alone here and just click continue. That's actually new inside of Ubuntu 16.04. They used to have nothing checked here. And you can actually check open SSH server there. But I'm going to show you actually how to install that once we get into Ubuntu. Okay, postfix server, just click internet site. The host name is fine, VM01. It's interesting, postfix is installed by default now. Postfix is basically the way to send email on Ubuntu. Usually that wasn't installed by default. It's fine if it is. It's an interesting choice. That's a little convoluted because not everyone may know what postfix is when they're installing this for the first time. It won't hurt anything to have it on there. And maybe that will even be removed in the final release. This is beta, so if yours looks different in any way, that may be the reason why. But chances are 90%, 99% of this stuff should all be identical to you installing Ubuntu on the Hyper-V software. Okay, this is almost done. Cleanup step takes a little bit. Okay, once this is done, it's going to ask us to reboot the machine. A couple more steps here. Oh, okay. The grub bootloader, just hit yes here. It's defined to install into SDA, which is the way Ubuntu Linux boots. And then these should be the last couple steps it does. It actually says finishing the installation. Okay, installation is complete. It's time to reboot your new system. Make sure to remove the installation media, CD-ROM. There is no CD-ROM here. We pointed it at that ISO, remember? We're going to see how this boots the next time and see what happens. So I just hit continue there. We'll see what happens here when this reboots. Okay, so that menu came up fine. And now we actually have Ubuntu 16.04 booting for the first time. And you can see here, we're on the development branch, and this is a little bit before the release, but now I can log in here. And now I am on the Ubuntu 16.04. Okay, so now you actually have this machine set up. And the other thing you can do is ping google.com, and you should have internet access. So that virtual switch stuff is probably the most confusing part of this whole Hyper-V setup, is that you got to make sure you do that correctly, or your virtual machine will not have internet. Okay, so the next thing is let's run some updates. So we're going to switch to root. Actually, we'll just use sudo apt-get update. see how if there's a bunch of packages to install here. Upgrade. Okay, you can see that it's scrolling off the screen a little bit. That's what's nice about what PuTTY's used for in a minute. Now, if you have any problems getting the mouse out, so like you click in here and then the mouse, you can't find the mouse. Sometimes it disappears. You can hit, usually it's Control-Alt will pull the mouse out of the the window of the virtual machine. I think this is pretty standard for virtual machine software is Control-Alt to pull it out. So let's click yes here. There's a couple of packages to update. There was very few. Okay, now let's install the SSH server. So we want to do sudo apt-get install SSH. You could have selected this option during the installation, but I like to actually show people how to install it afterwards in case you come to an Ubuntu machine that doesn't actually already have it. I'm actually kind of surprised Ubuntu doesn't. Linux distributions don't just include SSH by default now. It's a package that is used probably more widely than anything else on any other Linux, on any Linux distribution at this point. Okay, so I did ifconfig here, and you can see I got an IP address here of 192.168.1.106. Now, ifconfig on some machines won't work. It still works on Ubuntu, so I'm just going to leave it at that. If you have a Linux distribution that you can't get the IP address for, just Google it. Like CentOS is a different command at this point. I'd have to actually look it up myself. I've been using ifconfig for decades now, so it's hard for me to remember it actually at this point. But if ifconfig says, I don't know what that is, just Google it, CentOS, how to find my IP address, or the other Linux distribution you're using. Okay, so now that we get the IP address, you can come over here to PuTTY here and do the chef. So you want to do your username that you created during the startup, and then the IP address. You want to do 106. And then hit open. Click yes. And now put in your password. Okay, so now we're actually remote into this Ubuntu server running in Hyper-V. You can actually close this out. And you can actually, let's clear the screen here. So this is the window within the Hyper-V, and I just typed exit so you can get out of it. So you can actually close this window too. And now, where did PuTTY go? Oh, I think I accidentally closed PuTTY. Oh. Okay, let's just load PuTTY one more time. 106. You can click save here if you want to save it in this list. You got to give it a session name. VM01 was our server name. So let's click save. Let's click open. Let's type in our password. And now you can see you're inside the virtual machine. And you don't need Hyper-V or that window in the background running. You can actually use just PuTTY to control this machine. Let's actually do sudo apt-get install Apache 2. And Apache 2 is a web server that runs on Linux. Okay, now you should be able to bring it up in your browser. 106. And you can see Apache 2. So now we have, I'll go through the steps pretty quickly here again. So basically we have Windows 10 running Windows, the Pro version of 8.1 or 10. If you right click on here, you go to properties, you'll see it here. Got to make sure you have the Pro version. You got to make sure your chip supports virtualization, whether that's AMD or Intel. You want to Google that. Then you want to go to the control panel. You want to go to add remove programs. You want to go turn features and off. You want to click the Hyper-V. It'll reboot a couple times. You want to create your Hyper-V shortcut on your desktop. You just search for it here, Hyper-V. If you spell it correctly. Right click, go to open file location. Right click here, send to desktop. You can actually create two. Double click this. And you want to make sure then you come in here and you create your virtual switch. And you'll see it here. When I click virtual switch, you'll see this new virtual switch wireless now is permanently set here. You can select this for all your distributions that you use. Whether you install CentOS or any other Linux distribution, you can always use the same wireless adapter. Then you want to right click on here and go to new and go to virtual machine and follow all the steps. You saw the little bit of a hiccup I had with assigning the memory. I just changed this to 512 and it ran fine. Chances are if you have more RAM, you won't run into that issue. And then once it completes the startup process, you want to install the OpenSSH server, which was just sudo apt-get install SSH. You want to download PuTTY, and then you can see here that we are inside this virtual machine, and it has Python. Actually, Python now is not, Python 2 is no longer in Ubuntu. You can see here only Python 3 is installed now by default. If you need Python 2, you want to do sudo apt-get install Python. I believe is still the way to pull Python 2. So it's interesting. Python 3 is the default Python version now in the latest Ubuntu Linux distribution. So now we have Python 2 if you needed that. Okay, if you have any questions, put them in the comments below. Hopefully this tutorial will help you start to learn Linux. And please subscribe and follow and look for some of my other tutorials on how to start using Linux. Thanks for watching.